I was reading about they created the world's largest pickle, and this thing is huge. Apparently, it's a big deal. Ba-dum-bum. All right, if you can take two quick breaths with me, two healing breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth, preferably with your eyes closed, but however you feel most safe. So in through the nose, out through the mouth, and one more time. In through the nose, out through the mouth. All right. I'm just going to start spouting some random things. And if you take away something from this, great. Basically, after trauma affects our brain, our mind, body, and soul in different ways. Betrayal trauma in general affects us differently from, say, non-betrayal trauma. And I'll just mention three ways. Number one is that betrayal trauma is personal. If we lose a close family member, it's traumatic to our mind, bodies, and soul, but we don't take it personal. When we discover a spousal betrayal or some type of betrayal in our world, we do take it personal. We start thinking, what was wrong with me? What didn't I have? What did I lack? What could I have done better or differently? So that's the first way, it's personal. The second way is that it's a secret society. If you have a trauma in your life, let's just say, a parent passes or something, which can be very traumatic. You have, maybe coworkers calling you and your neighbors bringing over lasagna and macaroni and cheese for dinner, and you have people coming to the viewing hours and, your boss sending you flowers. But when you go through betrayal trauma, you don't necessarily have you don't want to shout it from the rooftops. You don't want to post it on social media, and therefore it's very isolating, which could be challenging on the healing journey. So that's the second way in which betrayal trauma is different from, say, non-betrayal trauma, is that it's a secret society. And the third reason, I mean, there's other reasons, but just for sake of time, the third reason betrayal trauma is different from, say, non-betrayal trauma is because non-betrayal trauma affects the present and the future. So if you have a parent pass, the holidays come and you're like, geez, I wish I could spend time with my parents for the holidays, or I wish I could, send my parents my kid's school picture or what have you. So it affects the present and the future. Betrayal trauma is the only trauma that affects both the present and the future, but also the past. Because now there's streets you can't drive by down anymore. Maybe there's restaurants you can't go to anymore. There's hotels you can't even say the name of anymore because that's where your partner was caught. So those are three ways how betrayal trauma is slightly different from, say, non-betrayal trauma. Now, I will say this: a couple areas of the brain that are affected from betrayal trauma is number one, the amygdala. So the amygdala is the almond-shaped little. It's in I think, the rear back of our brain, and that controls a lot of our emotion regulation. Some people call it the animalistic part of our brain, our reptilian part of our brain, because it just basically deals with emotion. But what happens is almost like a smoke alarm in our brain, is that if you take a smoke alarm and you kind of pound it with a hammer, now it's just going to sound even though there's no smoke. And that's what our amygdala does. And that's one of the areas of our brain that gets affected when we're traumatized, is our amygdala. And so now what happens is, it doesn't matter if we're washing dishes, being sexually intimate with our partner, grocery shopping, we are in a constant state of hypervigilant because the amygdala is constantly going off saying there's smoke everywhere. There's a potential fire everywhere. And there very well may not be. But that's what happens with our amygdala. Another area of our brain that's affected is the prefrontal cortex, the area of our brain that's logical. We don't think logical. We don't think logically. As a matter of fact, when triggers come, and if I can remember to come back to triggers, we'll talk about triggers. When trigger comes, this is what's difficult, because one of the things we really should do is engage the prefrontal cortex, because what's happening is that the amygdala is speaking so loud and going off, that we want to kind of drown it out by going into our logic. And one of the ways that I do it, which I'm going back to the whole trigger thing, but one of the ways that we can do that when we're triggered is by spouting out some math facts, because then we're engaging the logical part of our brain, and we're really dominating that part of our brain and reducing the amygdala part of our brain. So we don't have these triggers and we start thinking logically and whatever. But here's the problem. There's something called the corpus callosum. Okay. And I think it's like the gray matter that's in between our hemispheres. So we have the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere of the brain. And the right hemisphere, I believe, is the emotional part of our brain, and the left hemisphere is for the logical part of our brain. And so what happens is that after we're traumatized, a lot of this corpus callosum really gets damaged. And so what happens with people that are non-traumatized is they can see something that whatever they see, their left and right hemispheres talk to each other and say, "Oh yeah, that's kind of sad, but you're not affected personally because of this, and let's put this in, we can give some empathy or some sympathy, and let's maybe send a card to somebody, or maybe pat yourself on the back if it was you that this went through, whatever." When our corpus callosum's all screwed up and now our brains can't really the synaptics can't really work as efficiently as they could. Now sometimes you are have an emotion with no logic with it, or you have logic with no emotion in it. And I'll tell you something. One of the challenges and one of the reasons why healing is so important is because the more that we, and I want to be careful I don't trigger anybody by saying this, but the more we self-traumatize ourselves, and we can do that by either pain shopping. And let me just explain quickly what that is if people watching don't know. Pain shopping is this. Pain shopping is when we get a thought or we get a trigger, instead of addressing it, we entertain it. Pain shopping is, oh, let me see what the AP, the affair partner, let me see what they're up to. Let me see what they're wearing today. Let me see where they work. Let me see what they're buying online. So we go to social media and follow the affair partner. Pain shopping is let me go sit in the driveway of the hotel and go through the whole process and motions of what my spouse and partner and significant other did when they got out of their car and they walked in the hotel and they walked into the room with this person, and what did they do. And that's all pain shopping, because there's no that doesn't serve a purpose. That's just shopping for pain, re-traumatizing yourself, really continuing to fracture your corpus callosum. So you want to be very careful. And the other thing with that is, yes, our brain does rewire and our corpus callosum does kind of get fragmented and all this other stuff. But with work and hopefully early intervention, you could really start rewiring our brain, because there is neuroplasticity. Our brain can absolutely start to heal, manage triggers. How about that? Manage grief, which are all part of betrayal, and really not do a significant amount of damage, because unhealed betrayal, like I said, affects the mind, body, and soul. And there's a lot of professionals say long term, but there could even be short term physical effects of um, non-addressed trauma, whether that's night sweats, whether that's panic attacks, whether that's anxiety attacks, whether that's heart palpitations, whether that's absolute hypervigilance, without question. But then as you go on with unhealed trauma, now we're looking at, IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. Now we're looking at maybe some heart issues. Now we're looking at, if you had pre-existing issues, them coming back to the forefront. Trauma is like, I always say, trauma is like lava in our body. And just like lava, it will move around and it kills everything in its path. So you really want to get in there and do the necessary work, which leads me to my next point. What kind of work is best for everyone? Well, this here is one of the frustrations after trauma, is what is going to be most effective for me? Should I do EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization? When the professional has their finger and you're doing the eye movement. What is EMDR effective for me? Is tapping EFT effective for me? Tapping on certain points of your body. Is that effective? Is DBT, is talking coaching counseling effective for me? Is somatic techniques effective for me? Are 2 or 3 of these effective for me? Trauma yoga, trauma therapy. What is really going to be most effective? What am I going to be most receptive to? Because it's like anything else. 10 people can go to the gym and work on one exercise machine and have great results. 5 of them can have magnificent results, and the other 5 don't really see results. They need a different machine, and all of a sudden they're like, wow, this one really isolates my muscle groups, and I can see a difference. It's the same thing with a mental health professional. Depending on what their expertise is in, you may or may not get the full bandwidth of what they have to offer. And I understand this is frustrating because here you are thinking, well, wait a minute. I can't even think I'm in such a state of distress and duress right now. I can't even think. How do I even go about finding one of these professionals? Then you do find one of these professionals and you start to make phone calls. And of course, you're leaving voicemails. And 2 weeks later, when they get back to you, you're saying, do you accept my insurance? No, we don't. Okay. It's out of pocket pay. Yes, it's out of pocket pay. Okay. I'd like to make an appointment. Well, you have a 3-week waiting list. Okay. Put me on the waiting list because I can't be in this fetal position crying any longer. I have kids to feed. I got to get back to life. Okay. Give me 3 weeks. You're on my waiting list. Then you wait 3 weeks and then you talk to this person and you're like, we're just not jibing. I don't feel you. I don't get anything from you. And now you just wasted 3 months of your healing journey. I understand that's very frustrating. So one of the things you might want to do is a simple Google search to say, okay, let me read the different modalities and let me see just what kind of might speak to me. Maybe look at some videos on those modalities and say, wow, this one really speaks to me. This one really hits me at my core.